I'm glad you brought up prebiotics and fiber and the microbiome because the cool thing, I'm always asked about probiotics. The richest source of probiotics is plant food,
Mm.
raw fruits and vegetables. There's 100 million bacteria in an apple, and 90% of that is in the core and the seeds, which most people don't eat, but of course you can, and I do. But there's this beautiful balance where when you eat, and I'm not a raw foodist, but I eat a lot of raw fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
When you eat raw, you're getting good bacteria, maybe a little bad too, but that's okay. You're getting a ton of good bacteria and you're getting the fiber that feeds that good bacteria, right? So you're getting prebiotics and probiotics when you're eating plant food, especially uncooked. So, yeah, I don't take a probiotic.
It's a funny question. I get it as well a lot, and uh, you know, my kind of position on probiotics is that there are so many things to be focusing on first, and one of those is certainly eating a wide variety of whole plant foods that are rich in all of these different prebiotics, which act as fertilizer for the good gut bugs that you have. Um, do you eat fermented foods?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a recent study that came out of Stanford. Not sure if you've seen that one. It compared fiber to fermented foods, looking at the microbiome diversity and inflammation.
No. Talk about it.
Yeah, really interesting. So, led by the Sonnenbergs, who are sort of quite famous gut microbiome researchers at Stanford, and Dr. Christopher Gardner, and what they wanted to see was, is there a difference between increasing fiber in the diet versus adding fermented foods in terms of the composition of the microbiome? We know that a more diverse microbiome is associated with better health. Typically, people who are a healthier body weight, who are at lower risk of chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes and various cancers, have that more diverse microbiome. They wanted to see if these foods affected that, but also they wanted to see if these foods affected and modulated the immune system and whether there was an effect on inflammation. Again, because we know that chronic inflammation is a hallmark feature of many of these different chronic diseases. So really interesting study. And I love when researchers go and conduct very tightly controlled, randomized controlled trials, because they give us, great information that is quite reliable. And so they brought the subjects in, they split them into two different groups. These were healthy subjects. They took a baseline reading of their microbiome composition. This was done through a stool sample. And they had one group increase their fiber intake from 20 grams a day. That was the average of that group at the start, up to 40. And they had the other group add fermented foods to their diet, like kimchi and sauerkraut and raw kombucha, for example.
Now, did they have them eat more fibrous foods or just take a fiber supplement?
So it's a great question. So the fiber group, they actually said to get it all from whole plants, just to increase the foods in their diet.
Got it.
So no supplement. And the fermented food, the prescription was to have 6 serves of fermented foods a day, which is interesting. We can perhaps double back to
that's
why
significant.
That's a lot. And
yeah.
I don't think I've ever got close to that. And I'm not sure that's actually achievable for many people. So maybe we can circle back to that at the end and try and make sense of it. But so the study went for 10 weeks, and across this study, subjects were collecting stool samples each week, and then they were being analyzed, and really fascinating results. So let's start with the really clear-cut take-home message here. Fermented foods across the board increased microbiome diversity and drove inflammation down significantly. So that's a big tick, and that's quite a compelling study for us to sort of use to guide our diets. If we can add some more kimchi or kraut to our meals, that's great. On the other hand, the response to the increase in fiber to really surprise the researchers, certainly surprised me. It was a very individualized response. So what they saw was that certain people adding the fiber to their diet did have a reduction in inflammation, but for others, it actually increased their inflammation. And I can kind of make sense of this thinking about working with people on a one-to-one basis. There are certain people, when you do increase the amount of fiber in their diet, they report feeling a little bit uncomfortable. They're not sure whether these plant foods are suited to them. And the researchers thought, wow, that's interesting. Why would there be this sort of personalized response here? And they went back and looked at the baseline microbiome composition. And it was very clear if the subjects had a very rich, diverse microbiome, they handled the increased fiber very well, and it worked great for them. Those who had more of a weaker gut microbiome, who lacked that diversity at baseline, this jump from 20 to 40 seemed to rev up their inflammation. And so this is not to say that fiber is bad for certain people. The takeaway more is that for certain people, depending on where their baseline is at, they may need some different strategies and tools to use, to lean into, to increase the diversity of their microbiome before they go increasing their fiber by too much.
What I would love to know is, and I imagine they didn't do this, but I would love to know is, what happens to the person who's increased their fiber over time, right? So they have this initial spike. Their bodies are like, whoa, too much fiber. We don't know how to handle this, right? And then over time, as we know, our bodies are adaptive. My first question would be, I would hypothesize that inflammation would decrease over time, and that, right, their microbiome would become more diverse. Right. And their digestive system would adapt, and their body would adapt, and things would get better. But they would have that, even though they had that short-term initial, discomfort and increased inflammation. Because we see that all the time. Like when people make a radical diet change, a lot of times they feel bad in the beginning. They don't feel better, right? They get a little worse before they feel better. And low energy, maybe some aches and pains, some inflammation, digestive, discomfort, whatever, that kind of stuff. And, in our community, we're always encouraging folks, just stay with it. Like, just get over that initial hump. It's usually just the first week. And I don't know how long they had these people eating this way for. It was a couple of weeks, maybe.
It was a 10-week study. However, the researchers did hypothesize that perhaps it may take a little longer, even beyond 10 weeks. If they had to run the study for 4-6 months, maybe they would have seen those people adapt. As you say, it gets expensive to run a study that long.
Yeah, 10 weeks is pretty long, though.
Yeah, 10 weeks is 10 weeks is pretty long. So, they're now going to go and do some other studies. And one of the studies that they're looking at is, okay, well, if someone is perhaps a little more sensitive, then are there other strategies that they can lean into to help them incorporate more plants and increase their fiber over time without revving up their inflammation? And one of those ideas is the addition of fermented foods in conjunction with that, or the addition of fermented foods first to increase microbiome diversity and then slowly up the fiber intake.
They really need that third group, right?
Yeah.
That gets both the more fiber and the fermented foods together, and see what happens. Thanks for watching. If you like what you just saw, why not subscribe? Here's a link to do that. And if you'd like to watch the full interview, you can find it at chrisbeatcancer.com. There's a link to it in the description right below this video.